As we all know, heart disease remains the number one killer in Australia, with one life every 13 minutes, 48 lives a day, or about 8,008 a year. So chances are you probably will know somebody who succumbed to heart disease. I certainly know many, many of my friends. I've had family members, and look, hundreds of thousands of Australians live with it today, and I'm one of them. Look, I'm one of the lucky 6% to have survived a mild heart attack when I was 38. I'm 66 now, and I'm eternally grateful to the wonderful cardiologists at the old Royal Adelaide Hospital and my own cardiologist. My ticker, along with a stent that's been in there for something like 28 years, and it's working well beyond expectations. But while I may have given my own family a few heart attacks in my previous line of work, I'm determined to improve the lives of South Australians, and in whatever way I can, and that includes helping save lives. And that's why I've become quite passionate about having AEDs and defibrillators available and accessible in our communities. Look, I've been cognizant of defibrillators for some time, and it was only when I was having some discussions with St John's on another matter that I raised it. We often see issues in the community arising out of, that could be young sportsmen or young persons or even older people that have had sudden cardiac arrests or heart attacks and haven't been able to access treatment quickly enough for them to perhaps even survive that. So, look, I've been cognizant of it for some time, and it probably goes back to my own personal experience, going back to when I had my own. Now, I was one of the lucky ones, I know that, because a lot of people aren't, because they're not able to get that type of treatment very quickly and will save their lives. So that's been my intent, and only when I came into Parliament did I realise, look, if there's something I can do to help save lives, and not only are we saving lives, but also it would save a lot of money on the health system and in the economy itself, because the quicker that people are able to receive treatment, they're able to then get back to their normal lives. And AEDs have a role in that, and that's really been one of the driving factors for me. Well, look, I'm glad to say that the Legislative Council passed my bill to make AEDs mandatory in public and commercial buildings, workplaces, schools, sports club, event venues, hotels, and on public transport. And look, in doing so, I hope we can make South Australia the country's first heart-safe state in the nation. And I'd love to see other states follow suit. Look, if we just save one life through this, it will be so worthwhile. And when it comes to treating cardiac arrest, heart attacks, every single minute counts, every minute. Survival rates, as we know, are greater if aid is applied within 3 minutes. And that's why it's crucial to know where these devices are located, that they can stand out with appropriate signage, and we're having citizens who can carry out not only CPR, but also know how to use the devices. So I want to see them everywhere, just like we see first aid kits, like we see fire extinguishers. Well, look, there is no bill like this anywhere in Australia. This is actually an Australian first bill that's been introduced, hence why I've had a lot of interest from interested groups and organisations interstate, as well as here. The Heart Foundation, for instance, are strongly supportive of it. The St Vincent's Hospital have also been very strongly in support of what we're doing, and I've received a lot of messages of encouragement from around the country. I've had people here in South Australia from such diverse areas as the Centre for Economic Studies, who have congratulated me for the initiative, because they see the enormous benefits of this and the roll-on benefits to this as well to the community. Well, the next step is that the bill needs to pass the House of Assembly, and I hope that I can achieve this by the end of the year. And I've got a target in mind in October And look, it's really all about convincing the government to elevate this private members bill, just like they've done currently with a bill that endorses the taking of lives, euthanasia. Mine is more about saving lives, and I need to convince them of that, and I hope I am. So the intent of my bill is receiving warm support from all sides of the Assembly, and my goal is to get it prioritised. Well, look, I need to convince the government to back it for a start. They tend to think it's a costly exercise, but really what cost do you put on a human life? And we know just how much can be saved off the health bill when a person with cardiac arrest is treated with an AED quickly. The recovery is much quicker, so it's going to be a win-win situation. And as I've mentioned, I've received enormous support already from the community about this. And it's great to see that a lot of organisations, a lot of corporations are getting behind the introduction of AEDs, even before that we've got legislation to make it mandatory. We see organisations like, or corporations like Woolworths, Bunnings, Officeworks, Coles, and a lot of other smaller groups, that are coming on board and installing AEDs. The other day I was just told one of our biggest petrol retailers is also having them installed as well. So there are a lot of organisations and businesses that are starting to recognise the benefits of having them in there. I'm just hoping that the government just doesn't rely on them to be able to meet the expense of it. I actually want to see, well, of course they're going to have to meet the expense of it, and they're doing so voluntarily, but I want the government to move to make sure that these devices are mandatory. I want to see South Australia and Australia become, really strong, AED conscious and heart safe communities. We've got this great place in South Australia, Kangaroo Island, right? Now, that place is probably one of the biggest heart safe communities in Australia. They have something like almost 48 or 50 AEDs that have been set up by the community around the island. Now, this island is the third largest in Australia. It's incredible to know that 25% of Kangaroo Island's population, there's about 5,000 of them, know how to perform CPR and use these devices, and we have already had reports that people whose lives have been saved. Now, if Kangaroo Island can be a heart-safe community because of a strong voluntary input from people, I'm sure that South Australia can do that once we pass this legislation, and then it will roll out across the nation. That's what I want to see, and that's my goal. Well, they've got a doctor there by the name of Dr. Tim Leuenberg, and he's not only is he a very well-respected GP on the island, but he comes from a paramedic background, along with his wife as well. He saw the benefits of having AEDs, particularly in regional areas where it's very difficult to get paramedics and ambulance to somebody very quickly. You can imagine the waiting time for an ambulance in a regional area if you don't have many ambulances available. And, it could take up to 30, 40 minutes to reach somebody. But if you have these AEDs set up in community centres, sports clubs that are dotted around that regional area or on that island, and then you can get to them within minutes, you're going to save a life rather than having to rely on an ambulance to get to you and you don't know when that ambulance is going to arrive. And Dr. Leuenberg has done a fantastic job on Kangaroo Island. I've seen the work that they've done there. They are an incredible heart-safe community, and it doesn't matter where you go, you'll see one of these devices within easy reach. And that's what I want to see here in South Australia and also in Australia. Well, it's not just South Australians as well, Australians. And the main challenges are governments that keep their head buried in the sand and don't see the enormous cost benefits to the community of having these devices readily available and available quickly. Look, I'm sure that as soon as one government moves or one state moves with legislation, the others will follow suit. And I think that's going to be probably the biggest challenge for us, is having governments realise that for a small outlay, you can save a lot of money and you can save a lot of lives. Look, a week doesn't go by when I don't hear of the tragic death of people in the community through cardiac arrest or heart attack. Look, I had a family friend who only died recently because of it, had a sudden heart attack at home. And, unfortunately for them, help couldn't get to them in time to save their lives. I've had my own father who died of cardiac arrest at home. And, if I had one of these devices or one was available nearby, who knows whether we could have revived him. So it gives people that opportunity to be able to save somebody's life very quickly and get them to hospital for treatment. And as a result of that, they may then be able to go on and lead their lives as normal. Well, look, that was 10 years ago. It happened with my dad at home. And I know how distressing it was for one of my brothers. By the time he got there, he tried everything to try and revive him, CPR, but it was a bit too late for him. But look, that happens. But this is where I think we are at a point in our society where we do have the technology available, we do have the resources, and we should have the initiative and the will to be able to have these devices available in workplaces, in government buildings, at sporting venues, in schools as well. And this is another thing, I do want to see them available in schools, because not only are they there as a life-saving device in the event that something may happen, but also it teaches the students the benefits of CPR. And of course, you don't just use CPR in the event of a cardiac or heart attack as well. You could use it in other instances out in the community. If you're out on the beach or somebody has drowned, and if you can try and revive them. So these are the enormous flow-on benefits of having legislation in place that makes these devices mandatory. Because at the same time, it's not only using these devices, it's also the education in CPR and learning how to do CPR. A few years ago when I was working for Channel 7, I filmed a story at St John about learning how to do CPR. And I have to say I was really ignorant about it. I'd seen demonstrations and I've seen it being used elsewhere. But when it came to me being able to apply CPR, I was all at sea. It was embarrassing for me. But so I attended one of these classes at St John's, and it was very informative, very educational, and it taught me a lot about performing CPR and how important it is in saving a life. So I'm hoping that the rest of the community will see the enormous benefits of this. Well, look, they need to be mandatory simply because you need to actually have the community moving into line and being able to have these devices there as a necessity and recognising that they are needed in the community. And then, look, the only way to do that, you have to have them mandatory rather than having voluntary, because there will be organisations out there, or perhaps small businesses, that may not want to go to that expense of spending the money to have an AED in there. So, look, unfortunately, well, I don't know about being unfortunate, perhaps fortunately, we have legislation that we can move to ensure that these devices are installed. And look, it enables people to recognise that they are needed and why they're there. Well, interesting you should say that. I didn't mention that, but part of the legislation, of course, would be that you have an app like the Good Sam app. The Good Sam app is actually used on Kangaroo Island as part of their rollout of AED. So that is part of it. It'll be part of our legislation. Was that? The other aspect of the legislation is that our OOO emergency calls would also have a register of locations of AEDs. Well, I'm going to have to convince my colleagues in the House of Assembly the enormous benefits of having AEDs mandatory in South Australia. And then I'm going to have to convince the government they need to prioritise this bill. You know, the thing is, Luke, it's not until you actually have a personal experience with somebody who has suffered cardiac arrest or a heart attack that the message is driven home to you. And, you know, the more I speak to my colleagues in Parliament, the more I get reflections and stories about their own personal experiences, because there are many people out there who have that connection with it, and they see the benefits of these AEDs. And the moment, you know, initially, look, I won't say who it was, but one of the senior figures in the Liberal government here, when it was first mentioned to this person about AEDs, the first thing this person said, "Oh, I don't want a stranger, you know, hovering over me, breathing all over me with a device and trying to revive me with a device that I know nothing about." And I thought, what an ignorant response that was. A totally ignorant response. Whereas, you know, this person is senior enough in government to realise the enormous benefits of what this device can do. And look, I organised a forum here at Parliament a few months ago, and I invited a number of members to come, and they heard from Greg Page, the Wiggle. I had Greg come over here. Greg is a strong supporter of what I'm trying to do over here, and Greg gave a very compelling account to the members about his own personal experience and how a defibrillator saved his life. And, you know, I could see the looks on the faces of those MPs and their staffers that were there, how they could relate to what happened to Greg. And the fact is that he was still able to come and tell his story today because of the benefits of an AED. And they were most impressed by his compelling story. And that's what we need. We need more people like Greg in our community to tell that story and tell those stories about just the benefits of this. You know, years ago, I remember when I was a young reporter, we covered the story about Kerry Packer's experience with the Packer Whackers. I don't know if you remember that, but many years ago, Kerry Packer's life was saved after a heart attack while he was playing polo. And of course, as a result of that, he managed to convince the New South Wales Premier, Neville Wran, to have those initial defibrillators, and they were very expensive at the time. Yeah, the Packer Whackers, they were eventually called. He managed to convince the Wran government to install them in every ambulance. At that time, they were very expensive. I think they were something between $15,000 and $20,000. But wow, you know, have a look at what Kerry Packer set off. It was incredible what he did. He started a chain of events to have these devices installed in ambulances, and now, of course, in New South Wales, they're there. They're in ambulances around the country. So that goes to show you just what somebody's initiative can lead to. And I'm just hoping that mine does that. And as I said to you, Luke, I don't care who takes the credit for this, as long as we get it out in the community and we save lives. That's what's important to me, that it's a community initiative and that it is endorsed by the government and that people will see the benefits of this.